Friday Fenway Rundown. Chris Cotillo, Sean McAdam, back from parts unknown, from the home studios, plural.
No, they're known.
They're
Fort
known,
Myers is
yes.
known to people.
Uh, Yeah, fortunately for some, unfortunately for others. We are back. Chris Smith is back after some great work over the last few days. There is a little lull, and then Sean, you'll be right back down there within a week. So, like basically not like you're going to be home at all, but for today you are. So, congratulations and thank you for joining this fine program.
Pleasure to be here. I assure you.
I we went through kind of takeaways the other day as you prepared to fly home, and what an easy flight home that was. Am I right?
That was fun.
How,
Look, I'm not going to bitch too much. I got home, and I know people were delayed several days. I was merely delayed a few hours on a connection, so all good in the big picture.
Folks, a man with perspective. When I think Sean McAdam, I think endless perspective, and we see it again playing out today. Thank you for that. We kind of talked about a lot of different storylines the other day out of spring training. Over the last few days since we last did this pod, and people have been stuck shoveling and everything else here in New England. One of those situations has taken on a life of its own. Uh, Ever since Alex Cora challenged Marcelo Meyer with those quotes the other day, it seems as though the the quotes and the challenge and all that has become a stronger challenge and more of an indictment on the player over the last 7 days than it was when it was said. I think just because in the court of public opinion and people are taking it and running with it a little bit. Something I tweeted about last night. Put it pretty plainly here. Alex Cora a week ago said, with Marcelo, like I said yesterday or 2 days ago, we'll give him the baton, but he has to run. If he wants to be the starting second baseman in Cincinnati on opening day, there's a lot of work to do. It's not a given that he's the second baseman or third baseman for this team. There's a lot of things he needs to show us this spring. We expect him to do that because he's that talented, but at the same time, there's a lot of guys here that can do the job. People looked at it as, oh, Cora dresses this kid down, or this is what it is. I have my thoughts. I will let you start.
Well, I think they were definitely pointed remarks and said with a purpose, whether it was to get Myers' attention, whether it was to just state the obvious, which is that there is competition here and that there are others who could win the second base job. I don't know about the message being sent, but it does seem that when twice over the course of the offseason, you had Craig Breslow essentially advising Meyer to get bigger and stronger over the winter to maybe forestall any future injuries. We know that each of his last four seasons have been interrupted and curtailed toward the end with injuries. That one was kind of common sense that this is something that he had to ward off and take some steps to try to get stronger and more durable. But then the manager sort of firing this shot across the bow. I'm not sure the psychology of it or the reason behind it, but there was a reason it got said so publicly. Alex Cora does not indiscriminately throw those lines out there just for attention. I think he was trying to get Marcelo Meyer's attention, and I'd be interested to know sort of the mechanism behind it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess where I'm coming from on it is I think it's much more likely that it's just your run of the mill garden variety challenging a young player and nothing's going to be handed to somebody with 40 games in the big leagues. With a dose of something we've seen up close and personal with Alex Cora all spring, which is kind of um, just the hey, you guys don't know everything in the media. You guys are penciling Marcelo Meyer in. Uh, are you sure you want to do that? Here we have a
You're
competition.
not
We have all
suggesting
that
that
going
Alex
on.
Cora has a contrarian streak when it comes to his public comments, are
I
you?
would I would say that that's been very active this spring, and I think that there's an undertone of that in a lot of what he's been saying, and I think that's kind of made this Meyer thing blow up a little bit more than maybe it was intended. So you have the
Well, there's
contrary.
also the vacuum of any real news, right?
Yep.
So we have no controversy. We have nothing close to the Devers and Bregman situation from a year ago. People are looking around the diamond saying, okay, we know the outfield. We know Durbin's at third. We know Contreras is at first. We know Story's there. We know Narvaez. We know the rotation, except for maybe the fifth spot. The one thing we don't know for sure is second base. And so there's been some speculation about that, and he kind of seized upon it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that plays in. I was going to get there on just like, well, there's not much going on, and so this has become a week-long storyline on talk radio and stuff. I think that's a little overdone. It speaks to, I think, the mellow, tranquil nature of camp that we talked about the other day. But I really think it's just Cora basically saying, why are we handing this job to somebody who has not proven themselves in the big leagues? And that is the bucket Marcelo Meyer is in. Now, I would say that the media, the fans, people who are looking at a depth chart, have handed him one of the jobs because for 5 months during the winter, they did not have anybody else potentially in those spots. Only really think about all the guys that are competing for those spots. Durbin, Monasterio, Connor Falefa, Brendan Rodgers, even though he's sidelined right now. All those guys were added the week spring training began or 4 days before. So it was Marcelo Meyer and a bunch of TBA and TBD. Before that, that's why he was pretty much penciled in. And
yeah, it gained a lot of momentum.
Right. And so, that's kind of why. But I do appreciate that he is trying to make sure Meyer knows that nothing is given. To me, it's really less about when you look at how this thing's going to bear out. It's less about what Meyer does and more about the fact that there is not a lot of super intriguing options to take one of those spots over him. So,
Yeah,
I think you look at it from a perspective of, Durbin's playing a lot of third, Meyer's been playing a lot of second. I think they're looking at that as the most likely scenario. So now it's a second base competition like there has been every year for the last 10 since Pedroia went down. And who scares you? Do the Red Sox look at Monasterio as a full-time player? He was not that in Milwaukee, obviously. Mikey Romero is not a guy that people think could make this opening day roster, even if that's a conspiracy theory going out there. Siegler is a guy who's not going to be in the mix. He's hurt. Brendan Rodgers is hurt right now. Romy Gonzalez, you always talk about not a full-time player because of the injury risk, and here it is again. He's not going to be on the roster for opening day. So
Nick Sogard.
So like, where does it come from? Who's that
Yep.
guy? There's nobody that you'd rather have really
Right.
getting the vast majority of those at bats.
That's where we are. That's why we are where we are, because of the lack of uh, sensible alternatives.
Well, Connor Falefa is the one I forgot, but
right. But I think
stands.
we understand, and it's been said by Cora and others that they envision him more as a super utility guy. He not probably, he doesn't hit enough to warrant being in the lineup every day. The splits aren't that helpful when it comes to, facing lefties only. He actually had better numbers against righties last year, and they weren't very good. A valuable guy because of his versatility and his glove, but let's keep that in perspective. He isn't someone that you want in there 5 times a week. So it's kind of process of elimination. People said it has to be Meyer, and the last thing that Alex Cora likes is people making assumptions that he hasn't signed off on publicly.
Yeah, and I also think, you look at the flip side of that. The Red Sox were, whether it was not, being aggressive enough on a couple pursuits, Ketel Marte, whatever it is, they ended the offseason, number one, keeping a spot open for Marcelo Meyer, which I think they wanted to do, and also not including him in a trade package anywhere and kind of being resistant to doing that. And I think that's telling on how they think of him. I mean, I think everybody understands the player, right? Uber talented and has had this injury prone label because he's not been able to finish the 4 seasons in a row. And he is now, after kind of being a balanced prospect, looked at a guy based on a 44 game sample size who is an elite defender who has some development to do with the bat. And that's probably a better fit for other teams and other eras than this one, but it just is where he is. And I do think, still, and I stick by this even with Romy Gonzalez out, that he's not going to play much against lefties. And funny enough, today his spring debut comes against a pretty tough one in Chris Sale. But I think he's going to be the starter at second against righties. I think Monasterio is probably going to play against lefties with some Connor Falefa mixed in until Romy Gonzalez is back, if back at all. And we don't know. It's still early, but he's not close. Um, and, but with that said, I think this is also a good reminder that if Marcelo Meyer hits 180 over the first 45 games of the year and the offense is sputtering, could they inject somebody in there to try to get some life, whether move things around or, the unfortunate thing for them is that, if Campbell's bat is really hot in AAA, like you can't just put him at second because you're not really working him out there and they don't want
Right.
to. So they'll get there when they get there. Point is, if he's struggling through a month and a half, Meyer can be optioned down. This isn't a ticket to
Yeah,
the big leagues for life.
he's not going to be given a super long leash. And excuse me, one other thing complicating this issue is that you just made the reference to the fact that Mayer has not played in a Grapefruit League game to date. That will be somewhat outmoded by the time people are listening to this podcast. He will play this afternoon up in Northport against the Braves, but there's a little mystery sort of surrounding that. He underwent surgery in August. He was given a clean bill of health over the winter. Yep, recovering on schedule, no complications. And now all of a sudden there are hitting progressions that he's got to reach in the cage and on the side. It is strange that he hasn't been in a game yet.
Yeah, I think, to me, these things are mapped out like months and months in advance. And there was something that said in August or September, February 27th will be his first game, and they've just been sticking to it and slow playing it.
I mean, to me, there's a difference between Sonny Gray not being in a game, a track record. Everyone knows what he's capable of. He's kind of on his own program, doesn't feel the need to pitch in actual major league spring training games. Fine. Everyone knows that Sonny Gray is going to be either the number 2 or number 3 starter. Not a lot to prove. But when you are keeping a guy out through the first, 7 or 8 days, it's going to raise eyebrows and increase speculation.
Yep, and that'll end again today because he's playing against Sale and the Braves. And I think these at bats, how he looks against lefties, how he looks in these spring training games will matter. We know the defense, and I think more importantly, having the infield together at least for a couple days. Contreras is going to be going to the WBC, but seeing how it looks. Obviously, Durbin played a little bit of second. He's been playing mostly third. Are you with me that I don't think that they are testing out Durbin at third, Meyer at second, over and over and over, only to kind of unleash the vice versa here, which they have. I mean, Durbin's played a little bit of second, Meyer's played a little bit of third in the backfields, just to see what looks best. I think to me, they're getting the reps where they want them and where they foresee them, and they are also mixing in a contingency plan. Hey, we'll get you some work over here just so you're ready. To me, It looks like they've kind of made that decision at Durbin as the third baseman and Meyer at second.
Yeah, the only strange thing about that is that when they were still in the market for another infielder, and this is pre-Durbin trade, there were reports that the Red Sox, between the two positions, thought that Meyer was better suited to play third, and that increased speculation that the Red Sox would look for a second baseman. And Durbin has a background and history of having played second base in the minor leagues. He played there more in the minors than he did anywhere else. And then because the Brewers have Bryce Terang at second, one of the best second basemen in the game, Durbin fit in at third for the Brewers last year. And because he played there last year, he's now playing third with the Red Sox. But it was a little switch up where they seemed to like Meyer more at third than at second. And then for whatever reason, maybe it was just not a lot of alternatives on the second base market, went out and got a third baseman, which essentially forces Meyer to second. So the whole thing's been a little strange right up until today with, as we said, him being held out of the lineup for a while, despite purportedly being fully recovered and healthy. So we'll see how the next few weeks unfold.
Next up, fifth spot in the rotation check. Oviedo was uneven, wild, and apparently sick the other day when he pitched. Um, at this point, Crawford and Sandoval are still not in games. That's kind of meaningful. Um, and so they're definitely behind in terms of challenging him for that spot. What does Oviedo have to do in your mind to lose the spot to somebody like Early? Obviously, Tolley was shaky yesterday too, other than his USA presentation, which did pretty well. But what does he have to do? And do you look at Early as the guy who could snag it from him?
I think, to me, Tolley still has the higher ceiling there, even though Early has, if you take the whole body of work going back to September, other than that Tolley start against the Pirates and Skeens, which was phenomenal and sort of electrified Fenway on that Friday night, Tolley has been hit around a little bit, whether it be in another start where he couldn't land the fastball or being hit a little bit out of the bullpen, and it's not been great through the first two outings. I still think Tolley might be ahead of Early, but that could change. And I still think that it's Oviedo's to lose. Although, if you can't throw strikes, and he had difficulty doing that the other day, um, that's a that's an invitation for some more development time to work on things mechanically. We know that they love his extension and the ability to be out front and get on top of the hitter. Such a big-bodied guy with a powerful fastball. They're trying to get that velo cranked up a little bit. If he's not comfortable and he's not adapting to whatever tinkering they're doing to his mechanics and delivery, then either one of Tolley or Early could slip in. And I don't think he's got that spot locked up. I would say he remains the favorite, and I'm not going to disqualify him because he was a little shaky in his first one.
Yeah, I do agree that, walking people, hitting people is a way to work yourself out of that situation. I did have somebody or a few people tweeting at us, you guys were ready to anoint him as a member of this rotation when the trade happened, and now he's battling for a spot. Nice job walking it back. Well, here's something that happened in the meantime. They signed Rangers Suarez, so that pushed everybody down a spot. People forget that Rangers Suarez was not on the roster when Oviedo was acquired, so therefore it was easier to slot him into, at that point, either the 4 or the 5 spot. And I did go into spring training thinking he had the inside lane at number 5, and I think he still does, just
Mm-hmm.
because, Crawford and Sandoval did not finish the year healthy. They just did not start the year healthy. Early and Tolley could use some more development. I mean, the case could be made that Oviedo does too. But he's a guy with more of a track record. They obviously gave up a pretty good prospect in the password to get him. I don't think that's an open and shut case, though. And I think that's the most intriguing roster situation we have with a month to go. We talked about, roster projection. I wrote that for yesterday. I have Oviedo on, Monasterio on, Yoshida making the team. Not much intrigue there. I do think that number 5 spot's the most interesting thing. That brings us to our last topic. It was a topic I wrote very, very, very long feature on this week. Triston Casas. I know that I tend to find that Triston Casas is a very illuminating quote. I find that he is somebody that you can ask open-ended questions and just kind of let him roll, and you'll see what direction it takes you. I don't think it's, a lot of BS when you really get him going on topics as kind of, deep as the ones we talked about career crossroads and where he is. You're a little higher on the hot air scale, I would say, overall. But I wrote it. I want to ask you your thoughts on just kind of his attitude and where, you know, what you thought about, the comments in that story.
Well, I'll state the obvious. Tristan Casas does not lack for self-regard. He believes
Well,
in himself.
he could roll out of bed and have an 850 OPS was my favorite part of the.
Waiting for that to happen, but that'll be down the road. Uh, you know, it's fine to have confidence in yourself and believe in yourself. As a major league or pro athlete, you have to have that. You can't be up there doubting yourself. And Casas certainly doesn't. And he believes that he just needs to be healthy and the talent will flow from there. And good for him, except I don't think others are as locked in on the certainty of him being able to deliver given the opportunity. Um, you know, certainly his major league career has been derailed by a number of injuries. He had the cracked rib in 24, the knee, which cost him all but essentially the first month last year. So he hasn't really uh, been a full time regular for a long time. And even when he has been, the production hasn't always been there. There's power potential there. There's a good knowledge of the strike zone there. And there is a lot of, I think there's a pretty high ceiling, but he hasn't proven anything to me. And I think in his mind, it's simply a matter of being healthy. And when he is, everybody get out of the way. And I'd say that's overstating things in terms of how the team sees him and how other evaluators in the game view him.
Yeah. And, like I actually am very high on his potential, as has been broadcast on this very show many, many times. We had the argument heading into last year, would you rather have Casas or Duran? I was going to take Casas then. I just like, obviously he got hurt. I mean, and he didn't have a good first month. I still think that there's a ton of potential there, and he is, of everybody, on the 40-man roster, you know, if everybody's healthy, I would take him to lead this team in home runs. If everybody was healthy and equal opportunity, now he does not. So I would say Abreu is my favorite in that category.
Well,
In fact, he has like no opportunity as currently constructed, and so that to me
that's what I'm saying. Even if he
is the
were
huge
healthy,
concern.
how does he fit in right now?
Right,
He
right,
doesn't.
yeah, and I think that is we talk about and we belabor the point of the Yoshida being blocked and this and that. I mean, it's going to take really a Wilson Contreras injury for Triston Casas to force the issue. And I think, they can maybe get a month or 6 weeks out of a rehab assignment slash option. He has options to burn because, I think since he's come up, he hasn't gone down. So I don't think he's ever been optioned, right? Uh,
Not that I can think of.
so, obviously you have three, so there's plenty. But to me, you burn, you get 4 6 weeks to see how he does at AAA. If he's hitting the ball out of the ballpark and locked in there, then you owe it to your big league team to find a way for him to be in the lineup somewhere. And where does that happen? Not at first base, where Contreras, you're hoping, is having a big year. I think a lot of their offensive hopes rely on that guy anyway. And then at DH, where you have, those guys, the three outfielders, the built-in DH, and then Yoshida ahead of him now. I mean, they think this thing's going to work out. It's just another reason about, trying to find a taker for Yoshida, whatever it is, over the course of the next month. But, for a team that lacks power, this is a guy that actually can give it to you. I know you have your doubts. I know people have their doubts. He did have 24 home runs 3 years ago, and has, I think the most power potential if healthy and if given an opportunity. Does not have that opportunity. It'll be interesting to see how that manifests. He thinks he's going to be ready for game action in some form in an affiliate on opening day. He's another guy that could get into games here before the end. We'll see. But to me, it's a fascinating case. It's just, people look at the outfield log jam and, oh my God, how are they going to fit all these guys? Pretty simple. Duran's probably going to DH most days, with Anthony doing it some other times. Then there's the obvious Yoshida question. Then behind them, like, how do you fit Casas into here? How do you fit Christian Campbell? And at some point, something's going to give. They'll get there when we get there. And I'm sure we'll have it covered on a Fenway Rundown in the future. We'll be back next week. I don't think we're going to have that problem solved by then, but there'll be other stuff to talk about.